The DoD just reported that in 2014, almost the same number of service members, 19,000, reported unwanted sexual contact as in 2010. Still, less than 3 out of 10 are willing to report. The overall percentage of those who are reporting openly and seeking justice is declining, and a striking 62% retaliation rate went unchanged from 2012. And despite retaliation having been made a crime in last year's NDAA, the Pentagon reports no indication of progress on that front. Despite the Pentagon's spin, these numbers do not show an increased trust in a system that simply isn't working for the men and women in uniform. Mr. President, I want to draw your attention to comments made by the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Martin Dempsey, made earlier this year. He said, quote, "We're currently on the clock, if you will. The President of the United States said to us in December, you know what? We've got about a year to review this thing and show me you can make a difference. We understand that just because Senator Gillibrand's vote was defeated yesterday doesn't mean that a year from now it may not be reintroduced, and if we haven't been able to demonstrate we're making a difference, then we deserve to be held to the scrutiny and the standard." Mr. President, there is no mission in the world where our military, where this much failure would be allowed. And based on General Dempsey's own timeline, our men and women in uniform deserve a vote on this broadly bipartisan reform because the military has not been able to demonstrate that they can make this difference. And therefore, they should be held to the scrutiny this year. Throughout last year, we have continued to see the evidence of how much farther we have to go to solve the problem of sexual assaults in our military. We saw Brigadier General Jeffrey Sinclair, one of the highest-ranking officers ever charged with sexual assault, walk away with a slap on the wrist, reportedly over fears that the commanding officer had rejected a plea deal on lesser charges for political reasons, despite stated concerns over evidence. That case brings up the very important issue of undue command influence. Another reason why an independent justice system is needed. We should all be able to agree our brave men and women in uniform deserve blind justice. The scales should not be tipped in either direction, in favor of a victim or an accused. Why should our service members enjoy a lesser standard of justice and fairness than you and I, whose freedoms they risk everything to protect? According to a recent story in the New York Times, an attendee of a sexual assault prevention seminar was asked if things were improving. She said, "We all laughed. Sinclair was happening then. He proved this was a joke." The Times also chronicled the story of a survivor they called Chris from Ellsworth Air Force Base. On April 12, 2013, about 24 male officers of the 37th Bomb Squadron gathered at a strip club at the beginning of a pub crawl, including her commander. She was assaulted later that night. Again, according to the Times, quote, "What Chris encountered since reporting the assault was the same kind of cold-shoulder skepticism on the part of her commander that Christensen had seen in a vast majority of sexual assault cases, behavior that was supposed to have changed with the military's recent vows to support those who reported sex crimes. Further, she was retaliated against, which is now supposed to be a crime, and was told by a commander, quote, 'It's illogical for you to think that there won't be negative consequences to your reporting.' As she says, 'I was put on the shelf.'" Why in the world would we want this commander, who takes his team to a strip club and retaliates against a sexual assault victim, to have the authority to decide if a crime was committed or not? It's insane, and it's beneath our military members. I could read many more troubling cases, but perhaps the most eye-opening, showing the ongoing lack of accountability, was revealed in testimony by a witness at a court-martial on September 24, 2014, just 2 months ago. In this case, former Fort Leonard Wood Drill Sergeant Angel Sanchez was found guilty on multiple counts of sexually assaulting female trainees. According to the witness, the command sergeant major at Fort Leonard Wood said, and remember, this is just 2 months ago, quote, "If any more sexual assault cases come forward, the whole company of soldiers won't graduate." Not, "I don't want to see any more sexual assault." Rather, "I don't want to see any more reports." And here's how you really know the system's broken. When a cadet is instrumental in obtaining the first sexual assault convictions in over a decade at the Air Force Academy, he's expelled. When a chief prosecutor is too good at his job and briefs members of Congress, he's retaliated against and forced out. Or when a survivor comes forward, she's put on a shelf. Time is short, but there's more than enough time for Congress to actually do its job. We shouldn't have more calls for just a little more time. The DOD has failed on this issue for over 20 years now, and the scandals of the last 12 months and the latest data shows that they still don't get it. As the USA Today said, quote, "Over the decades, sexual scandals have spurred cycles of Pentagon apologies, congressional hand-wringing, half-baked attempts at action, and nibble-around-the-edges changes. Isn't it time that women and men who serve their country so nobly have a justice system that will serve them when they are victims of crime?" I agree. Congress should vote to remove the chain of command from these crises before year's end. Our service members deserve no less. I just want to clarify a few things that is very misleading about this debate. First of all, we are not making commanders less responsible. They are the only ones who can prevent retaliation from happening, whether it's by them or lower ranks, and they are failing in that right now. The only difference this bill makes is that 3% of commanders, the highest-ranking commanders, generals, will no longer make this decision, but trained military prosecutors. 97% of commanders' jobs do not change. They have to train their forces. They have to bring them into battle. They have to instill good order and discipline, and they have to make sure these victims aren't being retaliated against. That is where they are failing. We are making commanders more responsible, not less responsible. And what I want is not the most victim-friendly place in the world. I want no victims, and that's where we are failing.